and welcome to this video, where we will be exploring the Kurdish conflict in Turkey by looking at 5 shocking campaigns executed by the Turkish government, of which you may not have heard. Think of this as some sort of an academic crash course. We will make our way through a list of campaigns carried out by the Turkish Republic in implementing Turkish nationalist thought. Then, we will look at how each campaign had an impact on Kurdish identity. So, we're thinking of a timeline from the beginning of 1920s, with the rise of Turkish nationalism, to the current day, wherein this conflict still continues to play a prominent role in its discourse on nationalism. Before I start, but who are the Kurds? What is the Kurdish conflict, I hear you ask? Well, sit back, take out a pen and paper if you may. This is going to be a long one. You see, the Kurds have had a long history in fighting for their independence. They have long populated the region that spans over southeastern Turkey, northern Iraq, northwestern Iran and northern Syria. What some may not know is that although the Kurds never really had a state that they called their own, they did in fact live relatively autonomous lives under the Ottoman Empire. However, it all came crumbling down following the empire's dismantlement. In came Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of the new Turkish Republic and one of our key figures for this video. Atatürk was a strong advocate and in many cases the leader of the various approaches in creating an ethnically homogeneous Turkish state, as we will see later. So, what did he do? He signed the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, which established the borders of Turkey and divided the Kurds into the regions as we know it today. Perhaps it's best to sum up the effects of the Lausanne Treaty with Ismail Beşikçi's words. From the perspective of the Kurds and Turks, the Lausanne Treaty carries completely different meanings. For the Turks, the Lausanne Treaty founds an independent state. It brings the independent Turkish state an international guarantee. For the Kurds, by contrast, it founds captivity, slavery, and colonialism. Following this treaty, Turkey tailored its laws and policies around forming a republic based on Turkishness. During this process, the Kurds and other ethnic minority groups, such as Armenians and Jews, were discriminated against. And how that happened is what we will explore in the course of this video. So, let us dive into shocking campaign number 1. Citizen Speak Turkish. This was an initiative to get non-Turkish speaking peoples to speak only in Turkish. It was started by a group of law students in the 1930s, but later became funded by the government. Slogans such as "Speak Turkish or leave the country" were endorsed all over the country in the form of posters, public speeches, and protests. This meant that the Kurdish people who lived in Turkey could not speak in Kurdish and would be fined, harassed, or arrested if they did so. This explains the reason for the decline in the Kurdish language. More so, it means that Kurds were unable to carry forth their culture and heritage, as most of their history was gathered from spoken sources. So, what can we take from this? The Turks thought language to be a major component to the idea of an identity. In order to endorse this, there was a brutal effort to ban Kurdish, which was perceived as a threat in breaking up this notion of Turkishness. Next, shocking campaign number 2, the Sun language theory. This ties into the grassroots of the Citizen Speak Turkish campaign and was one of 2 ways in which the government, especially Atatürk, sought to theorise the superiority of the Turkish race, which assumedly predated other ethnicities and languages. Atatürk gathered a committee which concluded that all major world languages had descended from Turkish. And what was the evidence for this, you may ask? Well, that many years ago, the Turks had been sun worshippers and so developed the Turkish language based on ideas they had gathered from such a belief. Therefore, they were the earliest in creating a major language and in becoming the mother of all languages. Now, how does this theory tie in with the Kurds? This was a way to discredit the longevity and lineage of languages such as Kurdish, and instead justify why it was that non-Turkish speakers were in fact inclined to speak such a rich and ancient language. So, what did the Citizens Speak Turkish campaign and the Sun language theory mean for the Kurds? Not being able to speak your own language, being forced to learn Turkish, and thus lead to the destruction of Kurdish identity. The second of the two theories, and our third shocking campaign, is the Turkish history thesis, which claimed three main ideas formed from insufficient and subjective data. 1. That the Turks were a great and ancient race. 2. The Turks were the ones who created civilizations in all lands they migrated to. And finally, 3. Perhaps the one which highlights the most subtle but crucial giveaway from such a theory, that all of Anatolia's inhabitants were Turks. What does this illustrate about the Kurds? It provides a core theoretical assumption that there is no such idea as a Kurdish identity, because essentially everyone from that region was, and so is, Turkish. This is a very different idea of excluding the Kurds. It deliberately denies the very existence of the ethnicity as a whole, and looks to legitimise this by publishing it as an official research paper released from the government. Let us move to our shocking campaign number 4, the massacres committed by the Turkish government. What many do not know is that Turkey conducted numerous massacres against the Kurds, which has not been publicised to a great extent. For instance, the Dersim massacre in 1938, which killed 13,160 Kurdish civilians. Zilan massacre in 1930, 5,000 civilians. Zini Gediği in 1938, 91 civilians. The list does go on. So far, we have seen campaigns on language, history, and now the physical effort to eliminate the Kurdish identity. Which brings us to our 5th and final shocking campaign, Operation Peace Spring. Moving on from a more institutionalised race conflict, we can observe a more physical confrontation between the two parties. You may have heard of the Kurdish defeat of ISIS, which was followed by the US withdrawing its support for the Kurdish army in 2019. Turkey saw this as an opportunity to wage Operation Peace Spring in northern Syria in an attempt to target the Syrian Democratic Forces who had been occupants of the region. However, it was reported that the Turkish armed forces did not target the specific bases of their enemy, but instead were committing war crimes against the Kurdish civilians in northern Syria. The international community, including Amnesty International, voiced their concerns for the Turkish breach on human rights, which resulted in more than 300,000 people being displaced from their homes. So, what was the aim here? And why did the Turkish government see it fit to wipe out whole villages? Well, we see the ongoing pattern of self-determination on the one hand, with the Kurds trying to uphold their identity, and the effort to sustain Turkish nationalism on the other, with the Turkish government's attempt to eliminate the Kurdish issue by resorting to physical confrontation. At this point, we can give meaning to Mesut Yılmaz's argument that Turkey has viewed the Kurdish problem throughout history as reactionary politics and never as an ethno-political question. In other words, Turkey has approached the Kurdish question as a topic which needs to be countered and repressed, rather than opening wider discussions on the issue of ethnicity. Perhaps this is why the conflict continues to preside in the region. I'll leave you with a few questions. Were these campaigns an attempt to assimilate the Kurdish population or to outcast them? Can there ever be a state built on a single ethnicity? I hope I have somewhat shocked you with my 5 shocking facts. Thank you for watching.